Mommy.
The word shattered the silence of the boardroom like a gunshot. Every head turned as the 4-year-old girl burst through the doors, tears streaming down her face, running straight past the shocked American investors toward me. Not toward her father, the billionaire CEO at the head of the table. Toward me. His invisible secretary who had been raising his daughter in the shadows for 2 years. And just like that, my carefully hidden life exploded in front of $300 million worth of witnesses. Kim Hana had been invisible for exactly 2 years and 3 months. As executive secretary to Park Jae-wook, CEO of Korea's largest tech empire, she had perfected the art of disappearing into the background of his billion-dollar world. She anticipated his coffee order before he arrived each morning, solved his problems before they reached his pristine desk, filtered his calls with military precision, and existed in the margins of his perfect corporate life like a useful ghost. Nobody really saw her. Nobody needed to. That was exactly how executive assistants were supposed to operate in the ruthless world of Korean corporate culture. But there was one massive problem she couldn't solve from the shadows. His daughter. Park Min-ji was 4 years old, impossibly sweet, and completely starving for the one thing her billionaire father refused to give her: time, attention, love. Since his wife's tragic death 3 years ago in a car accident, Park Jae-wook had transformed himself into a working machine, cold and calculating, and driven only by quarterly profits and market domination. Min-ji was raised by a rotating carousel of professional nannies who never lasted more than 3 months before quitting in frustration or tears. Hana knew exactly why they kept quitting, and it had nothing to do with the child being difficult or spoiled. Watching a sweet little girl press her face against the window every single evening, waiting for a father who never came home before midnight, broke something fundamental inside anyone with a functioning heart. Hana's heart had cracked and shattered exactly 17 times in 2 years before she finally stopped counting the pieces. It started small and seemingly innocent enough. When nannies called in sick at the last minute, Hana would quietly babysit Min-ji in the executive daycare center on the top floor, reading colorful picture books between her conference calls and wiping away tears after bad dreams. She became the invisible constant in a little girl's unstable and lonely world. When Min-ji's 4th birthday arrived and her father completely forgot about it because of back-to-back investor meetings, Hana slipped out during lunch and bought a small strawberry cake from the bakery across the street. They celebrated alone in the empty playroom with the door closed. Just the two of them in their secret world. Min-ji's tiny voice joined Hana's as she made a silent wish and blew out 4 pink candles shaped like butterflies. Her father never knew it happened. Nobody noticed these stolen moments of affection and care. Not the other secretaries gossiping by the coffee machine. Not the executives rushing between meetings. And certainly not Park Jae-wook himself, who barely seemed to register that his daughter existed most days. Min-ji started calling her Hana Uni at first, which was appropriate and proper. Then just Hana as they grew closer. Then one quiet afternoon, while Hana was carefully braiding her silky black hair before the current nanny arrived to take her home, the little girl whispered the single word that would eventually destroy everything. "Mommy." Hana had frozen completely, her fingers tangled mid-braid, her breath catching in her throat. She gently corrected the child with soft words, explaining that she wasn't her real mother, just her very good friend, who cared about her very much. Min-ji had nodded seriously like she understood, but Hana saw the absolute truth blazing in those innocent dark eyes. In the 4-year-old's lonely heart, Hana already was her mother in every way that actually mattered. The catastrophe that changed everything began with a text message exactly 30 minutes before the most important meeting of Park Jae-wook's entire career. The current nanny quit via text with no warning, no apology, just a brutally curt message about finding someone else to babysit his spoiled brat. Hana stared at her phone screen in growing horror as reality crashed down around her. The backup nanny was completely unreachable. Every other staff member in the building was terrified of Minji after the unfortunate biting incident last month. And in exactly 45 minutes, American investors worth $300 million would walk through those glass doors expecting perfection. Hana made a spectacularly bad decision born of pure panic. She brought Minji down to her desk, right outside the main conference room, set the sleepy child up with coloring books and noise-canceling headphones, and prayed to every deity she could remember that Minji would stay quiet and occupied for just 1 hour. She really should have prayed harder. The meeting started absolutely perfectly. Park Jae-wook commanded the massive glass-walled room with his usual icy precision and devastating charisma. His presentation was flawless. His financial projections were undeniable. The American investors shifted visibly from skeptical to genuinely impressed within the first 20 minutes. Then, exactly 45 minutes into the presentation, the heavy conference room doors suddenly exploded open with a bang. Minji stood trembling in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit, tears streaming down her flushed cheeks, her small body shaking with sobs from whatever terrible nightmare had gripped her during her nap at the desk. Time seemed to stop completely. Every executive froze mid-breath. The American investors turned in their expensive leather chairs with confused expressions. Park Jae-wook's laser pointer wavered on the projection screen as his face shifted from shock to barely controlled fury in half a second. Hana moved on pure maternal instinct, rushing forward to intercept the crying child before this turned into a complete disaster. But Minji was much faster than anyone expected. The little girl ran past Hana's outstretched arms, past the enormous mahogany conference table, past the stunned executives in their $1,000 designer suits, and launched herself directly at Hana, with a heartbreaking wail that echoed off the glass walls like a siren. She screamed for her mommy, sobbing that she had experienced a terrible dream and begging Hana not to leave her alone again. The silence that followed was so complete and devastating it could have shattered diamonds into dust. Hana's entire face burned hot with embarrassment as every single eye in that room locked onto them like laser beams. Minji's small arms wrapped around her waist in an iron grip. Tears soaked completely through Hana's silk blouse. The child's whole body trembled against her like a leaf in a storm. One of the American investors spoke first into the terrible silence. An older woman with steel gray hair and sharp calculating eyes that suddenly looked remarkably warm and approving. She commented enthusiastically about how wonderful and refreshing it was to finally see a genuinely family-oriented company in Asia, how incredibly rare it was these days to find executives who actually prioritized their children instead of callously abandoning them for quarterly profits and stockholder meetings. Hana watched in absolute slow-motion horror as understanding dawned across Park Jae-wook's normally expressionless face. He looked at his daughter, clinging desperately to his secretary like a lifeline. He looked at the American investors, nodding with obvious approval at this touching family scene. He looked at $300 million hanging in the balance on the edge of a ridiculous misunderstanding. Then he did something completely unprecedented in 2 years of Hana knowing him. He smiled. Not his usual corporate smile that was cold and professional and utterly fake. A real smile, warm, paternal, devastatingly convincing. He crossed the room in smooth, confident strides and placed his hand possessively on Hana's shoulder, like they had performed this exact dance 1,000 times before in their marriage. He told the investors in a warm voice that family was absolutely everything to him, introducing Hana as his beloved wife with a firm squeeze that felt simultaneously like both a threat and a lifeline. He explained that raising Minji together was their greatest joy and most important accomplishment, far more valuable than any business deal. Hana's panicked mind screamed at her to correct him immediately, to tell the truth, to stop this insane charade before it spiraled completely beyond control. But Minji was still crying into her shoulder. The investors were beaming at this picture-perfect family tableau, and Park Jae-wook's hand on her shoulder felt like an iron shackle she couldn't possibly escape without destroying everything. The meeting concluded 30 minutes later with champagne toasts and enthusiastic handshakes all around. The lead investor insisted firmly on a family dinner in exactly 6 days, explaining that she wanted to properly meet the remarkable woman who had clearly managed to civilize Seoul's most notorious workaholic bachelor. Park Jae-wook agreed with that same devastatingly warm smile, confirming the date with absolute confidence. The moment the elevator doors finally closed on the investors, his smile evaporated instantly like morning fog under harsh sunlight. He told Hana to meet him in his private office immediately, and his voice could have frozen the Han River completely solid. Hana followed him into the massive corner office with her heart trying desperately to escape through her ribs. She fully expected to be fired on the spot, possibly with security escorting her out. She had a resignation letter mentally drafted before the door even clicked shut behind them with terrifying finality. But Park Jae-wook didn't yell or rage like she expected. He did something infinitely worse. He stood silently by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline, with his back rigid and his shoulders carrying visible tension. Then he explained in a voice completely devoid of any emotion that the American investors had made their position crystal clear during informal conversation after the meeting ended. They only partnered with stable family companies that shared traditional values. Their previous Asian partner had been catastrophically involved in a massive public scandal involving a secret second family, and the investors had lost tens of millions when that partnership imploded spectacularly in the media. They would only sign contracts with Park Jae-wook if they genuinely believed deep in their hearts that he possessed the family values and moral character to match his impressive business acumen and track record. He needed Hana to pretend to be his devoted wife for exactly 1 week, just until the contracts were formally signed and the money safely transferred. Then they would quietly stage an amicable separation, and she would be compensated extremely generously for her trouble and discretion. He named a specific figure that made Hana's knees go weak. It was enough money to completely pay off her mother's crushing medical bills from the cancer treatment, enough to cover her younger brother's entire university tuition for 4 years, enough to fundamentally change her struggling family's financial future overnight. Her mouth formed the word no before her brain fully caught up with the implications. Park Jae-wook turned from the window, genuine surprise cracking his usually perfect icy mask. Hana told him firmly that she had exactly one completely non-negotiable condition for this insane arrangement. Minji could never know this was fake. Whatever happened between the adults, the little girl had to believe it was totally real. She had already survived losing her mother tragically. She absolutely couldn't survive losing another maternal figure. Something painful flickered deep in Park Jae-wook's dark eyes. Recognition maybe of a truth he had been desperately avoiding for 3 solid years. He agreed immediately without hesitation. Hana moved into the sprawling Park family mansion in Gangnam that same night with a single suitcase. The ultra-modern estate felt more like a sterile art museum than an actual home where people lived and loved. Her assigned bedroom connected to Park Jae-wook's master suite through a shared sitting room, close enough for believable appearances to any staff, far enough for actual reality and boundaries. Minji was absolutely overjoyed beyond words. The little girl threw herself into Hana's arms the moment she walked through the massive front doors and refused to let go for over an hour, chattering excitedly about how her secret dream had finally magically come true. Every single word cracked Hana's heart into smaller pieces. The first formal dinner with the investors 2 days later was a carefully choreographed performance worthy of Broadway. Hana wore an elegant dress that Park Jae-wook's personal stylist had selected, understated but clearly expensive, the perfect outfit for a CEO's wife who possessed her own quiet power and confidence. She sat beside him at the exclusive restaurant, with his hand occasionally finding hers across the white tablecloth, each casual touch sending unexpected electricity racing through her skin that she desperately tried to ignore. The investors asked about their romantic love story with genuine interest. Park Jae-wook, ever the strategic mastermind, had prepared a detailed script in advance. They met when Hana interviewed for the secretary position. He was immediately drawn to her competence and natural grace. She saw past his cold exterior to the wounded man underneath. They fell in love slowly and carefully, building a partnership based on deep trust. It was so devastatingly close to the actual truth that it physically hurt to hear. What wasn't scripted at all was Minji suddenly interrupting the adult conversation to proudly show everyone her crayon drawing of their family. Daddy and Mommy and her, all holding hands under a bright rainbow. The lead investor actually had visible tears in her eyes. Park Jae-wook's hand tightened around Hana's until she genuinely thought her bones might crack under the pressure. The next 4 days blurred together into something dangerously close to actual happiness. Morning breakfasts where Park Jae-wook actually sat at the table instead of leaving before dawn like usual. Afternoons where Hana brought Minji to the office for lunch in his private dining room. Evenings where they read bedtime stories together as a complete family unit. Minji snuggled contentedly between them, with her small hand clutching Hana's, while her tiny feet pressed against her father's leg. Hana watched Park Jae-wook slowly defrost like ice under spring sunshine. The way he started genuinely smiling when Minji showed him her drawings. The way he came home at 6 instead of midnight. The way he looked at Hana across the dinner table with something terrifyingly close to real affection. She was falling completely in love with him. She knew it was absolute suicide. She knew this whole thing was fake. She knew in 2 days the contracts would be signed, and this beautiful fantasy would evaporate like a dream. But her stupid heart didn't care about logic or self-preservation. On the 5th night, Park Jae-wook actually joined them for Minji's bath time, something he apparently hadn't done since his wife died. He laughed when Minji splashed him with bubbles. He dried her hair with gentle hands. He tucked her into bed with a kiss on her forehead. Hana watched from the doorway with her heart absolutely shattering, because she knew this couldn't last. On the 6th morning, everything fell catastrophically apart. Hana woke early and went downstairs for coffee. Park Jae-wook was in his study on a phone call with his office door slightly open. She overheard him talking to his lawyer about the investor contracts being finalized that afternoon. Then she heard the words that destroyed her. He told his lawyer to have the separation agreement for Hana ready to sign by next week, emphasizing that the financial compensation needed to be generous enough that she wouldn't cause problems or talk to media. He casually mentioned that his daughter would be upset for a few days, but children were resilient and forgot quickly. Hana stood frozen in the hallway, coffee mug trembling in her hands. He had meant every word of their fake arrangement. This was purely business to him. Minji was just collateral damage he was willing to accept. She had been a complete fool to think anything real was happening. She didn't confront him. She didn't make a scene. She simply packed her single suitcase while he was in the shower, left a brief note saying she couldn't do this anymore, and walked out of the mansion before Minji woke up. She couldn't say goodbye to the little girl. It would break them both. She returned to her tiny apartment and ignored 17 calls from Park Jae-wook. She sent a formal text stating she was returning his money and quitting her position effective immediately. The next 3 days were absolute agony. She couldn't eat. She couldn't sleep. She cried until she had no tears left. Her phone rang constantly with calls from Park Jae-wook that she refused to answer. On the 4th day, her apartment buzzer rang at 7 in the morning. She ignored it. It rang again and again. Finally, she answered the intercom with annoyance. Minji's tiny voice came through the speaker asking why Hana had left them, asking if she didn't love her anymore. Hana's heart shattered completely. She buzzed them up immediately. Park Jae-wook stood in her doorway looking absolutely terrible. He clearly hadn't slept in days. Minji clung to his leg with red eyes from crying. He asked Hana quietly if they could talk. She let them in reluctantly. Minji immediately ran to her, wrapping small arms around her waist. Park Jae-wook explained everything in a rush of words. The phone call she overheard was him protecting her. His lawyer had warned that the investors might investigate their sudden marriage. He was creating legal paper trail to make their separation look planned and amicable instead of suspicious. The comment about Minji forgetting quickly was him lying to his lawyer because he couldn't admit the truth. The truth was, he had fallen completely in love with Hana. The truth was, he couldn't imagine his life without her. The truth was, He had been planning to ask her to make this arrangement real and permanent. He was just terrified she would say no, because why would she want a broken widower and his traumatized daughter? He had already told the investors the truth yesterday and risked losing everything. He didn't care about the money anymore. He only cared about them. Hana stared at him in shock as tears streamed down her face. 6 months later, the proposal was real and perfect. Park Jae-wook took them back to the playground where Hana had celebrated Minji's 4th birthday alone. Minji presented the ring with a gap-toothed smile, carefully rehearsed by her father, but delivered with pure joy. Hana said yes through happy tears, while Minji cheered, and Park Jae-wook smiled like he had won something infinitely more valuable than any business deal. The American investors had actually increased their investment after learning the truth, moved by his honesty and priorities. Park Jae-wook now left work at 5 every single day. They had family dinners, weekend park visits, bedtime stories read in silly voices. Minji had 2 parents who loved her desperately. Kim Hana was finally beautifully visible, and she would never be invisible again.
If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe. It truly helps the channel grow and allows me to bring you more stories like this. Thank you for listening. See you in the next one.